Hello, today I'm going to be taking you through a lovely book I found called Edgar Cayce's Approach to the Rejuvenation of the Body. And forgive me, that's inverted, but it's a book by John Van Auken. So it's not an Edgar Cayce book. It's a book written by someone who was I'm looking for a better word than devotee, but someone who was very inspired by and loved the teachings and writings that came through Edgar Cayce. If you're new to Edgar Cayce, which you're probably not if you're watching this, but just in case you are, Edgar Cayce, depending on the semantics you want to give him, was a psychic, a channel, a medium, trance medium that could put himself into a light sleep. He was actually called the, good morning everyone, he was called the Sleeping Prophet, from Alabama originally, I believe settled in Virginia Beach, that's where the ARE Center is now. He gave something like, obviously, give or take, he gave something like 25,000 readings in his lifetime. I've heard that one of them was incorrect because he read for someone who had a twin brother. I love that. Someone not without his critics, of course. Everyone's got critics. Everyone loves to criticize. But Edgar Cayce spoke to all elements and facets and sides of the human experience, gave many predictions, most of which I don't know about. But I know about Edgar Cayce. I'm familiar with Edgar Cayce because of what came through about supporting the human system. I've heard him connected with things like peanut oil, like he suggests peanut oil for all sorts of ailments and so on. But this book, forgive me, it's inverted, but Rejuvenation of the Human Body came into my world at some point. I don't know where, I don't know where I got this from, who gave it to me, but I have it. And it's an unusual book, and if I'm doing these book reviews, I'd like to be showing you things that you're not gonna find everywhere. You're not gonna find everywhere. So this book was published in '93. This guy John Van Auken, I can't really find much on him. He, judging from some of the time periods he talks about, he must have been in his 60s when he wrote this. And he put this together because he loved it. I don't feel ego when I read this book. I don't really feel agenda other than a strong interest in supporting the human system. As I take you through this, bear in mind you're going to be hearing three voices. You're going to be hearing the voice of Edgar Cayce and what came through him. You'll be hearing the voice of John Van Auken because he's the author, and of course you're hearing my voice because I need to give my perspective on it. I'm going to go through the. I'm going to take you through it in order, and my intention for sharing this is that my hope rather is that there's the 1, 2, or 3 things that just kind of spark something in your mind that will support you physically, holistically, I should say. That's the word of the day. So I'll go through the principles of this and the mechanics of rejuvenation. He talks about diet, he talks about exercise and rest, he talks about meditation as well. This is not a vastly complicated body of work. I will say, in case I forget to say, there are some pretty cool illustrations in this book. That's part of the nervous system there. For a woo-woo book, this gets into some nitty-gritty. So let's just jump in talking about some of the principles here. Edgar Cayce, in terms of what came through him and him as a person, dealt in holism. Okay, so it's not just dealing with one element of the body, one part of the body, one part of the system and psyche. It's all subsystems. That's what his human physical ministry, as it were, was about. Overall improvement. He was about improving from within. I picked out this quote and I love it. I absolutely love it. Here's the quote: "You cannot cure a quinine mind." Quinine is one of the cures for malaria. "You cannot cure a quinine mind of malaria with anything but quinine." Okay? You cannot cure a quinine mind of malaria with anything but quinine. And what he's really saying there is he's talking about the human system of belief, because if you're working with someone in any respect, in any trade, and they have a belief, whether it's right or wrong, true or false, you have to address it you have to begin by addressing it at the level of that belief. Taking it higher, taking it upwards, taking it beyond, but you have to start there. And I really agree with that. He's talking about the reviving forces, the working with the natural sources of energies plural, that permeate the body, that activate it, that keep it alive. And I like to think of the body as maybe you played one of those video games where you had to get a ball through different shapes, and you had to align the shapes so that it would go through. I see the body a bit like that, but a vastly complicated version of it. And all these energies all these higher energies, because of course there are higher energies, because we wouldn't be alive if there wasn't. Look at being alive for a moment, it's phenomenal. I look at being alive like that. All sorts of higher energies that go into the perpetuation of our life, and to what degree our body is in good holistic shape or not, we can receive those. Okay? And he says that quietness in any activity will expand and open up to that. Quietness in any activity, driving, talking, teaching, quietness in anything. Now, he goes on to talk about the right mental attitude. Bear in mind the source material is a good 100 years old, and our semantics, especially in 2020, are vastly different. Right mental attitude. I'm going to read you out something from here about that. Our actions must reflect our deepest beliefs and values. If they do, then the life force can flow through us without getting meshed in a web of hypocrisy, contradiction, and disharmony. Okay? Now, if you're watching this right now, then you're on social media just like I am, and you'll know how much is being flung around, how much opinions and judgments and so on is getting flung around right now. And so it's our choice if we want to connect with that, engage with it, take it on, and so on. Or are we gonna be aware of what our values are, what our principles are, and align with that and attend to what is ours to attend to? I hope that makes sense. Let me just say a little bit more here. He often identified incoordination of the two nervous systems, that's the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, as one of the major causes of illnesses, equating it with the two parts of ourselves, the inner and the outer, being at war with one another. Okay, so in our modern vernacular, we would say things like incongruence. Well, I would anyway. He talks about the quote, destruction of blood forces. Okay, so we can create blood in our body, we can destroy it by the suppression of the self. Okay, so suppression of the self would be not speaking your mind and heart when you need and want to, not following your heart's calling in life, and it's a challenge for all of us, but to suppress oneself, to willfully hold one's back, is to destroy the body. That's what he's saying here. He goes on to talk about a 7-year cycle of renewal of the body. I think that's a known thing now. I think we all know that. John van Auken, he talks about having taken himself through 4 different cycles of this. So it's 28 years, isn't it? 4 different cycles of 7 years. And the important thing here is that if we've got a belief, when we do, we've got tons of beliefs, don't we? We've got tons of beliefs about ourselves, the world, what shouldn't be. If we want to change that, and we know that in 7 years' time from this moment, we're going to have an entirely new body, we can choose new at any point. And It's about the next choosing of that new moment. And you keep doing that, you will have new beliefs. We all at some point talk about patterns. We all at some point talk about why am I blocked by this? Why am I resistant to that? If you think about, we'll have an entirely new all of this in 7 years' time, then that's something to celebrate, isn't it? Okay. In this book, he speaks a lot about attunement. And it's an important thing. I'm looking for the next sentence here. So much I want to say. If you associate the expression woo-woo with the expression attunement, then that's not where I'm going with this. That's not where I'm going with this. Let's say you run a business, or you want to physically change your shape in some way and exercise. Attuning to the things in life that will support and enhance that, then will make it happen faster. Of course it will. Of course it will. That's a basic manifestation there. So he's talking about tuning the mind, emotions, body, all of it, tuning all of it to the higher vibratory forces in our body and in the universe, wherever they may be. And it's tremendously important, because if we are the vessel, if we are the holders of high energy, and we must be, because if that wasn't in our body, if that wasn't in my body, I'd be dead right now, then the more that we're looking for it and tuning ourselves to it, like you would tune an instrument, the more we can receive. The more we can receive, the better this all functions. And not just this, but the things you want to happen, your relationships, all of it. I'm very interested in attunement in general. It goes along with what we think about, of course, but it's more than that. It is more than that. So if you're interested in this type of stuff right now, I would can I offer to you to maybe write that word down on a post-it note or something like that. Have it around, because it's an activator. It's an activator. That word by itself is an activator. Okay. Moving on then, the second chapter is about the mechanics of rejuvenation. And here John Van Auken is getting into the physicality of the body. And he's talking about the my accent is changing as the years go by. I still want to say the circulatory system, because that's how we say it in England. But you would say the circulatory system, wouldn't you? Anyway, the blood, the nervous system, and the endocrine system. I'm gonna really condense this now, because he gets into John Van Auken gets into some of the biology here, and it's not completely relevant to this conversation. Anyway, in terms of the blood system, which is tremendously important mentioned a lot in Cayce's writings, we're talking about vitalizing it, we're talking about ionizing it, that's I-O-N, and the electrical activity. We're talking about ionizing it, that's I-R-O-N, and carbonizing it, or oxidizing it, maybe. He talks about the lymph system as well. And bear in mind, again, this is 100 years ago. The lymph system, in terms of exercising and massaging, getting fluid moving through the system. So maybe that's another one for you as well. Remembering the lymph system, the lymph nodules as well. In terms of the nervous system, that's the central nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. He talks about the body-mind connection, that it's not singular, it's not one thing. Forgive me for being a parrot here, but again, this was 100 years ago. This is 100 years ago. Part of the reason I want to do this right now today is to celebrate, to acknowledge Edgar Cayce and the phenomenal work that came through him. Whatever you think about him. Looking at the endocrine system, the glands, he's mentioning that, and there's a tremendous amount on the endocrine system in here. He's talking about the feedback relationship, the regulation of the body through that. To take a tangent here, just as out of interest about Edgar Cayce and what was recommended. Now, this isn't something you'd go and do, but he would recommend, and I think through his work he constructed it, a radial device that actually used the voltage of the skin to regulate bioelectrical imbalances in the body. A radial device, it was called. And someone else developed something called a wet cell battery, which actually did emit a voltage and did do the same kind of thing. John Van Auken's writing this in the 80s and 90s from something that had been written decades before that. We've got all sorts of things. We've got all sorts of things in this day and age that probably do better than that. I'm trying to think. I used to go for it. Biofeedback. I think that's what it was called. Biofeedback. That stuff is pretty amazing. And what we're looking for here is an overall coordination of body systems and subsystems, and how we can help that. All right. So then he talks about diet, and Edgar Cayce was big on food as a medicine. Food on a medicine as medicine. If we're eating something, we're looking to build blood vessels, we're looking to build nerve tissue. You talk about foods that would appear above the ground, leafy greens, stuff that you know this stuff, don't you? You know this stuff. While he was recommending fish, in this day and age, of course, we don't know where fish comes from, or we do know where fish comes from, but fish isn't as maybe clean as it was decades ago. It talks about eating raw vegetables, raw greens once a day. He was against overstimulation, and that's sugar, refined sugar, alcohol, and fried food. I like fried food. I'm going to get on to alkalinity in a second. Forgive my accent. Then we got vitamins. Again, about replenishing the blood supply, he talks about vitamin E, not just A and B, but also regulating varying vitamin E intake. I don't expect anyone watching and listening to me right now to go out and do this. And of course, you'd go on your feelings, or you'd ask your doctor and anything. It's more just of interest of this body. Interestingly enough, for me, he talks about in this book, Edgar Cayce talks about something I would understand as methylation, because he says don't just go and take lots and lots of B vitamins and B complexes and so on. You got to work with what your body's going to receive. It's methylation, isn't it? And again, this is very, very ahead of his time to be talking about this. In terms of acidity and alkalinity, also very ahead of his time, recommending the raw greens, not recommending fried food for that. With the digestive system, there's a tremendous amount on that as well, so I'm just going to sum up. He's recommending food selection first, right? So rather than dealing with something after the event, actually looking at what you eat rather than how your body is working with what you've eaten. And the vagus nerve has gotten very vogue, hasn't it, in recent times? A tremendously important part of the central nervous system, and he mentions it in here. I love that, absolutely love it. Let's see what else. Oh, okay. Then on to exercise and rest. Not a tremendous amount talked about on this. Something I love about Edgar Cayce, you probably do as well, is some of the verbiage. It's a little archaic now for our times, but it's I like how classical it is. I like the innocence of it. So anyway, talking about going out, getting fresh air, and the concept of nature's carers. Like, it's all out there. There's a window here. It's all out there. All the stuff we need is out there. It's not in here. Going outside, your lungs let go of carbon, and of course you oxygenate the blood. You know this. He would talk about sleep. Let me quote this. Sleep is the building time of the physical forces to give and partake of rejuvenated expression. I think we all know that sleep is a rejuvenating experience. I can be guilty of I can be guilty of going short on sleep myself. Honestly, got up at 5 this morning. Not the greatest example of that. So I'm going off paper today. I just thought I would. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about is meditation. Meditation's a charged word. We've all got our own opinions of that, okay? Meditation. By meditation, he's talking about something that gets you in an altered state. So he's not talking about working from this consciousness right now that we're in and changing this. He's talking about going into another state of consciousness because of what happens there. Some of this has gotten a lot more widely known more in the last 10, 15 years. Like you might know about, you might be familiar with alpha waves and the 5-10 minutes or so it takes to shift into from beta to alpha. Now that really wasn't widely known 20 years ago. He's talking about attuning the self to higher vibrations. Again, working with the central nervous system, the autonomic system. And there's two types of meditation that's talked about in here. He calls one the magic silence, and the other is the Kundalini. So I'm going to talk about the magic silence one. You've all heard a trillion times, be still and know God. So I'm going to just convey to you how it's conveyed in this book, the meditation of be still and know God. I'm going to try and do this. If I say be still, and on the still you breathe in, and you breathe out, you allow a pause, and then you've got know God, and you breathe in on the God, breathe out on the God. You might like to do this with me now. So you're breathing in on the second word. So be still. Know God. Now perhaps you can feel that. I think you can. So consider doing that. Well, let's not give a number to it, but consider doing that until you don't want to. Edgar Cayce would talk about meditating for an hour and you'd like it and enjoy it. But the magic of silence, and as I said earlier, silence holds in it all the vibratory elements that will power the body. He talks about Kundalini, powerful Kundalini in here as well. Now, you may have a charge with that word. You may have a particular reference with that word as well. With Kundalini, as I'm going to convey this to you now, we're not talking about that specific type of yoga where they wear white hats. The Kundalini experience can happen, probably does happen to everyone at some point in their life. But we're talking about actively allowing a greater energy into our body. Not talking about channeling. We're talking about actively allowing a greater energy into our body. And that's not a 5 minute. That's not a 5 minute do it while you're cooking pasta thing. That's a do it once you're confident and familiar with your energy anatomy, because it is very powerful. In terms of the breath and that, should this spark you to want to look into Kundalini, we're looking at opening and strengthening the breath. We're looking at the rising breath and the descending breath. We could talk all week about the breath, couldn't we? Last thing I want to say, and I might post this later on, his or spirit working through Edgar Cayce had a very slightly differentiated version of the 7 chakra system that we do. Like this was the first one, this was the second one. And at the end of this book, when he's talking about prayer, it's explained how the Lord's Prayer actually superimposes on the 7 energy systems. It would be a little complicated for me to read this out to you, because really you kind of need to read it yourself. I think I'll post it later. But that really is all I got to say about this. This is the book, Edgar Cayce's approach to rejuvenation of the body. I know it's backwards. I could have done something about that. I know how to do it now, but I didn't. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who gave it to me years ago. But I hope that in listening to this, there's been a couple of nuggets for you to apply it for yourself. Whether it's getting outside, whether it's greens, whether it's acidity, alkalinity, whether it's ionizing the blood and central nervous system in some way. I hope there's been something for you in that. There's so much wonderful information and positivity that came through Edgar Cayce. Last thing I'll say about him is in between Edgar Cayce being Edgar Cayce and a prior lifetime of him being an Atlantean priest, apparently he was a gambler in the Wild West. And I love that because it shows that none of us are perfect. We all, our souls all need to create the experiences we need to create. There we go. Anyway, you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Debbie, I shall post that later on. You have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Thank you for listening. And I will, oh yeah, Monday I'll be doing a new moon meditation. So I'll be doing the readings on Tuesday this time. It's slightly different this week. Anyway, my love to you, God bless, and see you again.